You know that feeling? When you're really, really grinding on a problem,
Hmm.
your brain feels like it's just working overtime, and you kind of naturally assume, okay, I'm putting in the effort, so I must be figuring this out.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
But is that feeling, that mental strain, actually a reliable sign that we're, on the right track?
Well, that's the super interesting question you posed with the material you sent over.
Right.
And we've got a fascinating study here that digs right into exactly that. It's called Comparing Mental Effort, Difficulty, and Confidence Appraisals in Problem Solving, a metacognitive perspective from Educational Psychology Review.
Okay.
It's a real look under the hood, so to speak, at how we judge our own mental work and whether those judgments actually line up with how well we do.
Okay, so the point here isn't just about, like, patting ourselves on the back for trying hard.
No, no, no.
It's about whether our gut feelings, how much effort we think we're using, or how tough a problem feels truly tell us if we're succeeding.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, I think, is that this study also looks at how those feelings compare to how confident we are in our answers.
Okay. Confidence, too.
That's right. The researchers gave people a variety of mental challenges. And just to give a clearer picture, you tackled similar kinds of things in the sources you shared.
Right.
These included verbal logic problems, the
Mhm.
kind where you have to really parse the wording carefully,
Yeah, those can be tricky.
and also nonverbal reasoning tasks.
Yep.
Two specific examples they used were the missing tan task.
Missing tan. What's that?
It's where you visually identify which geometric piece doesn't fit with the others.
Okay. Visual puzzle.
Yep. And the mental rotation task, where you're comparing rotated 3D shapes in your mind.
Okay, so a real mix of brain teasers then, verbal, visual.
Exactly, to see if the patterns held across different types of problems.
Now, I know a lot of research, especially in education, looks at how much effort students say they're putting in
Hmm.
or how hard something feels to them.
Right.
And they use that as a way to gauge maybe how well they're learning or if the teaching methods are working.
That's a key point, definitely.
It's almost like they're taking our subjective experience as like the gold standard.
That's often the case, yeah. In educational research, these self-reports of mental effort and difficulty are frequently used as indicators of something called cognitive load.
Right, cognitive load, how much mental bandwidth something takes up.
Precisely. And it's used to assess, how effective instruction is. But this particular study takes what they call a metacognitive perspective.
Metacognitive. Okay, can you give us a quick refresher on that one? Thinking about thinking.
Yeah, that's the gist. Think of it simply as thinking about our own thinking, or maybe keeping tabs on our own thinking.
Okay.
Metacognition involves us monitoring and assessing our own cognitive processes, our own thoughts. And this study questions whether those self-reports, of effort and difficulty are always accurate. Just like we can be super confident in an answer that turns out to be wrong.
Right, happens all the time.
The researchers wondered if our feelings of effort and difficulty could also be based on, well, misleading clues.
So it's like our brains might be taking mental shortcuts when judging how hard we're working or how tough a problem seems.
Exactly.
And those shortcuts aren't always reliable.
Precisely. Which leads us to this idea of metacognitive monitoring. That's how we track and evaluate our own understanding and performance.
Okay.
And according to what's called the cue utilization approach, we don't always have direct access or insight into how well we know something or how we're doing. Instead, we rely on these heuristic cues.
Heuristic cues.
Yeah.
Mental shortcuts again.
Yeah, mental shortcuts are rules of thumb we use to make these judgments about ourselves.
Okay, like if a memory pops into my head really easily, I might assume I know it really well,
Perfect example.
even if I don't actually have a deep understanding.
That's a classic fluency cue influencing your judgment of learning. Spot on. And in this study, the researchers were interested in both intrinsic cues.
Intrinsic.
Things related to the problem itself, like maybe a puzzle having lots of pieces. That feels inherently complex.
Got it. Part of the task.
Right. And also extrinsic cues, things related to the learning situation, like whether you're being timed, maybe.
Okay. The context.
Yeah.
And one of the potential cues they really focused on was how long it took us to answer a question, right?
Uh-huh.
Our response time.
Exactly. That was central. The first big question the study looked at, RQ1, was whether response time acts as a cue for how much mental effort we think we're putting in, how difficult we think the problem is, and how confident we are in our answer.
Okay, so comparing response time to all three feelings.
Yep. And across all three of their experiments, the verbal logic puzzles, the missing tan, the mental rotation, they found a pretty consistent pattern.
And what was that pattern? Do we tend to think we worked harder on the problems that took us longer? Is that the gist?
Yes, you've got it. The study found that our appraisals of mental effort and difficulty were more strongly linked to response time than our confidence appraisals were. So if we spent a long time on something, we were much more likely to say, wow, I really exerted myself on that, and whoa, that problem was really tough.
Right.
But the connection between how long it took us and how confident we felt about being right was weaker.
That makes intuitive sense, actually. If I'm staring blankly at a problem for ages, it definitely feels hard and it feels like effort.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that our confidence wasn't as strongly tied to that feeling of time dragging on.
Well, and what's fascinating here is that other research has actually shown that response time can be an unreliable cue for confidence.
Oh, really? How so?
For instance, sometimes we feel more confident in a quick answer, like a gut feeling, even if it turns out to be wrong.
The fast and frugal heuristic sometimes leads us astray.
Could be. And this study suggests that this potential unreliability might also apply to how we perceive our effort and the difficulty. Just because something took a long time doesn't automatically mean we solved it correctly, or even that we used our effort effectively.
So just because the mental gears felt like they were turning really slowly doesn't necessarily mean they were turning in the right direction.
Precisely. A really good way to put it. Which leads us neatly into the second question the study explored, RQ2,
Okay.
which was, how well do these feelings, effort, difficulty, and confidence, actually predict whether we ended up getting the answer right? So which feeling is the best indicator of our actual success?
Right. Which one's the best mental crystal ball, so to speak?
Yeah. And the study found that while all three, mental effort, difficulty, and confidence, did predict success to some extent.
Okay, so they all have some value.
They do. But confidence and difficulty appraisals were generally stronger indicators of accuracy than mental effort appraisals.
Effort was the weakest predictor.
Generally, yes. And this held true for both ways the study looked at effort, what they called goal-driven effort and data-driven effort.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. What's the difference between goal-driven and data-driven effort in this context?
Sure. The study defined goal-driven effort as the effort we consciously decide to put in. It's driven by our desire to succeed.
Right, like that extra mental push you give yourself when you really want to nail an answer.
Exactly. Data-driven effort, on the other hand, is seen as the feeling of effort that the task itself seems to demand based on its characteristics.
Okay.
It's more of a bottom-up sense of how much work the problem inherently requires just from looking at it or starting it.
Interesting distinction. So even if we really try hard, that goal-driven conscious effort, it doesn't necessarily mean we're more likely to get the right answer. That feels almost counterintuitive.
It does feel that way, doesn't it? But that's the potential implication here. The researchers suggest that goal-driven effort might sometimes reflect effort that's not actually productive.
How so?
Maybe because we're using the wrong strategy or focusing on the wrong parts of the problem. Just, wanting to succeed and putting in a lot of perceived effort doesn't guarantee you're channeling it correctly.
So effort could be wasted effort, essentially.
It could be. Or maybe just inefficient effort.
But you said difficulty seemed like a better predictor, along with confidence.
Yes. Our sense of how difficult something is seems to be more closely aligned with the actual demands of the task.
Okay.
If we perceive a problem as very challenging, that perception often reflects something genuinely complex about it, which in turn relates more strongly to how likely we are to solve it correctly compared to just how much effort we felt.
So how difficult something feels is maybe a more honest signal from our brain than just the feeling that we're trying really hard.
That's a great way to phrase it. It appears, based on this study, that our assessment of difficulty is maybe less influenced by some of those potentially misleading cues, like just raw time spent, compared to how we judge our own effort expenditure.
Okay. Now, the third experiment used that mental rotation task. You mentioned they could actually measure how complex the problems were objectively.
That's right, yeah.
What did they find in that part of the study? RQ3, I guess.
Yep, RQ3. In the mental rotation task, the complexity was measured objectively by the angle of rotation needed to match the shapes. Bigger angle, more complex rotation needed.
Makes sense.
What they found was that our difficulty appraisals were more strongly correlated or linked to the actual complexity of the problem, that rotation angle, than our confidence appraisals were.
Okay, so difficulty tracked objective complexity better than confidence did.
Correct. And interestingly, our effort appraisals, both kinds, goal-driven and data-driven, showed a similar relationship to complexity as our difficulty appraisals did.
So wait, when the task was objectively more complex, we were more likely to rate it as difficult.
Hmm.
And we also felt like we were putting in more effort, which makes sense.
Yes.
But our confidence in solving it didn't necessarily track that objective complexity as closely.
Exactly. That's the key finding there. Our subjective feeling of difficulty and also our feeling of effort seems to align better with an objective measure of the problem's complexity than our confidence in our ability to actually solve it does.
Wow. So we might be overly confident even when facing a really complex rotation.
Or conversely, maybe lack confidence even when the complexity isn't objectively that high. Confidence seems a bit more detached from objective difficulty in that specific task.
This is really making me rethink how I approach learning and, problem solving in general. So, okay, across all those different kinds of tasks in the study, the verbal, the nonverbal, what are the big overarching takeaways for us?
Well, I think the most consistent finding, the thread through all three experiments, is that our appraisals of mental effort and difficulty are indeed influenced by factors like response time.
How quickly an answer comes to mind.
Right. And also the inherent complexity of the task itself. And this challenges that common idea that these self-reports are always reliable indicators of the actual mental resources we're using.
Which is important for that whole cognitive load theory area you mentioned.
Absolutely. It suggests maybe we need to be a bit more cautious about relying solely on self-reported effort or difficulty as direct measures of cognitive load without considering these potential biases.
So when we think, wow, that felt really hard, or man, I worked my brain on that one, it might just mean it took us a long time to muddle through, not necessarily that we were engaging in deep, effective, successful thinking.
That's a crucial distinction the study points towards. It highlights that our feelings about effort and difficulty seem prone to these potentially misleading cues, much like our confidence levels can be sometimes.
Right.
And furthermore, they really stress that effort and difficulty appraisals aren't interchangeable, even though they're often treated that way in some research or discussions.
How so? Not interchangeable.
Well, because difficulty appraisals seem to be more closely tied to the actual demands of the task, and crucially, we're better at predicting success than effort appraisals were. They're measuring slightly different things, it seems.
Okay, so for you, the learner, listening to this, the key message seems to be when you're grappling with a problem and your brain feels like it's in overdrive,
Yeah.
that feeling of effort might be more about how long you've been stuck on it, or maybe how intricate the problem seems on the surface, and less about whether you're actually making progress towards the right answer.
Yeah.
Essentially, trying hard isn't always the same as succeeding or even thinking effectively.
Precisely. Confidence and, interestingly, your sense of how difficult the task is appear to be somewhat better indicators of whether you're actually on the right track compared to just the raw feeling of expending mental energy or effort.
This really raises a big question for me then. If our perception of effort can be so easily misled by things like time,
Yeah.
how can we get a more accurate sense of our understanding and progress when we're learning something new or tackling a tough problem?
Yeah.
What can we rely on besides these subjective, potentially biased feelings?
That's a really important question, and honestly, one that this study helps to highlight the need for. It doesn't give all the answers, of course, but it points the way.
How so?
Well, it suggests that future research could, and probably should, explore other cues that might influence these appraisals. For example, how does getting feedback, actual feedback, affect how we perceive effort and difficulty over time?
Ah, okay. Does feedback recalibrate these feelings?
Maybe. Or how do these biases, if they are biases, ultimately impact our learning strategies and decision-making in real educational settings, like classrooms or online learning?
Yeah, lots to unpack there. It
Yeah.
definitely gives you something to think about personally, too. It makes you wonder if we should be paying more attention to how challenging a concept truly feels, rather than just how much mental strain we think we experience while trying to grasp it. Maybe focusing on identifying the difficulty is more useful than just noting the effort.
That's a really interesting thought, and if you, the learner, found this deep dive into the relationship between our internal mental experiences and our actual performance intriguing.
Yeah.
The researchers have actually generously made their original study and all their data openly available.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you can find it on the Open Science Framework, the OSF repository. We can put the link in the description, but it's easy to search for. It's a fantastic opportunity to really dig into their methods and findings yourself if you're curious.
Fantastic. We'll definitely link to that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really seems that understanding these inner workings of our own thinking, these metacognitive processes, can really help us become more effective learners and maybe more insightful problem solvers. It's not just about putting in the hours or feeling the burn, so to
Yeah.
speak.
It's also about understanding when our feelings might be steering us wrong, or at least giving us incomplete information, and maybe finding more reliable ways to gauge our actual progress and understanding.